It looks like we are well and truly into the sequel era, aren't we? Not too long ago, we got confirmation that Pixar plans to make a sequel for one of their hit films from the 2010s, Coco. For some reason, I'm actually rather shocked about that news. It's strange to say because Pixar's always had a rich history of making sequels. That's just one of the things they're known for by this point. We have the old classic with Toy Story 2, which did very well by the standards of the time. Grossed $500,000 in 1999. That's nothing to sniff at for an animated movie. Although, I suppose it really was Toy Story 3 that kicked off that sequel era well and truly. How couldn't it? It grossed $1 billion. Then we had Cars 2, which whilst bad, did well enough. Then there was Monsters University, which whilst a prequel, is a similar enough concept and played on the same nostalgia. Surprise, surprise, it did well. Grossed over $700 million. Cars 3 was middling. But Finding Dory and Incredibles 2 were smash hits that both grossed over $1 billion apiece. And what do you know, so did Toy Story 4. So I guess it shouldn't be a surprise that Coco, which did very well on its original release, grossing $800 million plus, is going to be getting a sequel to cash in on. The theory being the sequel should outgross the original, as it has the power of nostalgia around it. They're probably hoping that all their sequels are able to cross that $1 billion gross. After all, the first two films of this sequel pivot from Disney and Pixar have done so with Inside Out 2 and Moana 2. Why not Coco? Its original film outgrossed both of them, I'm pretty sure. On top of it, Pixar's had a pretty rough go of it since Toy Story 4. The pandemic happened, which cut Onward's run at the box office short, and this also meant that a bunch of Pixar films were heading straight to Disney+. We're talking movies like Soul, Luca, Turning Red. Yeah, they ended up getting limited runs later after restrictions were lifted, but it just wasn't the same. The moment was gone. It's certainly a case of what could have been, isn't it? Maybe they all would have flopped, but you could always argue they might have made a huge amount of money as well. Could they have been the next big thing if given the chance? When Pixar returned to cinemas with Lightyear, flop. Big time flop, lost money on it because people had gotten used to watching Pixar on Disney+. Then Elemental did okay, but it's not what they would have wanted either. They would have wanted more. Do you know what did do well though? Inside Out 2, a sequel. Broke the all-time animated gross record for a time and brought the studio back to its glory days with their biggest hit ever. Obviously, they want to follow that up with some more big money hitters. Yes, they have stuff like Alio in the pipeline, which I'm actually very excited about, but I do think the reality is that they can't trust it's going to be a success. The likes of Toy Story 5 and The Incredibles 3 though, good chance they both crack $1 billion. That's exactly what Pixar wants. So with all that being said, I shouldn't be shocked that Coco's getting a sequel, but I still was. And I think the major reason behind that is that the first film felt so self-contained. For reference, Coco follows the story of Miguel, a 12-year-old aspiring musician who lives in a family where music's reviled and banned due to his great-great-grandfather walking out on the family. Noticing that a guitar in an old photo of the man matches a guitar of the famous singer Ernesto de la Cruz, he tries to tell his family about it, but his grandmother instead responds by destroying his guitar and banning him from playing any music at all. Desperate to be able to compete in the town's talent show and to try to prove himself, Miguel breaks into Ernesto's mausoleum to steal his guitar because he feels like as a descendant, it's really his, but he finds himself cursed to the land of the dead instead. Found by his family, they take him back across the bridge and into a city with a deceased descent. Here it's revealed that when he found the photo of the guitar, he didn't put the photo of his great-great-grandmother back on the ofrenda, and thus, she couldn't cross over to see her daughter and other descendants. He learns that he needs the blessing of a dead relative in order to return home, and he needs to do so by morning, or he's going to be stuck there forever as a dead person. So his great-great-grandmother Imelda offers to send him back with her blessing, but only with the promise he'll give up music forever. He doesn't want that, and he runs away with the idea that he can meet Ernesto de la Cruz and be saved by somebody who understands him. Enter Hector, a down-on-his-luck skeleton that Miguel learns used to play with de la Cruz long ago. He says he'll help Miguel, so long as he places a photo of him onto an ofrenda so he can continue to exist and be able to visit his daughter. Miguel agrees, but flees again when the family closes in. He eventually manages to sneak into de la Cruz's mansion and bonds with his newfound family over their love of music and desire to live their dreams. Only for Hector to crash the party and accuse Ernesto of stealing all of his songs. The two also realize that Ernesto poisoned Hector when he tried to go home to be with his family. Ernesto, no longer willing to send Miguel home with this information, decides to toss them both into a pit, where the two realize that Hector's daughter is Coco, who in turn is Miguel's old and frail great-grandmother who's losing her memories rapidly. When dementia finally claims her and she forgets Hector, he's going to fade out of existence forever. His final death. Rescued by Imelda, who intends to send Miguel home, the family in the end bands together to take down Ernesto when they learn that Hector's about to vanish, and thus they go to De La Cruz's big concert to get Hector's photo back to put on the ofrenda. They manage to reveal to the big skeleton crowd that he's a murderer and a fraud who stole all of his most famous songs through a televised confession, and then by showing him throwing Miguel off a cliff, and then he gets crushed by a giant bell. Justice is served. Miguel rushes back home to save Hector, and through the power of song, he gets Coco to remember her father in one of the most emotional Pixar moments of all time. This allows the family to have stories of him to pass on to keep his memory alive, and so the next year, when they put his photo on the ofrenda, he's able to come and see his family. And I just watched that ending again. Goosebumps, chills, tears, all of the above. Probably one of the best Pixar endings ever. So that's probably why I was shocked. It feels like a perfect ending, and one that's tough to follow. I feel like a lot of people shared my shock, and in fact, I've noticed that there seems to be a little bit of anger in regards to this decision, if I'm being perfectly honest. A lot of those classic takes, oh, this doesn't need a sequel, we should be getting original content, they're milking the franchise now, this is gonna suck, etc, etc, etc. However, that being said, I actually disagree with a lot of those takes. The studios have not been doing too crash hot. I'm sure we've all seen that a lot of staff has been laid off over the last couple of years. I'd prefer that they make more sequels to get money, which allows them to take risks in some other movies, and also prevents people losing their jobs. But from a pure creative point of view, I still think this is a franchise that could certainly support another film, and is open-ended enough to really go in any narrative direction they choose. As long as the animation and world design remains as good as it was originally, and they have yet another banger soundtrack, as well as focus the narrative around a sense of family and belonging, then I truly think they're going to set themselves up for success. We all need to be weeping by the time the film is over. That's what defined the first movie, and what the franchise should be known for. If it moves in a different direction and has a different emotional center, then you can say they made the wrong choice. I doubt they will though. Pixar knows where the money's at. That being said though, what could the movie be about? That's the real question. And it's one that we won't be getting any answers to anytime soon. I mean, let's not forget that they currently intend to release this movie in about 2029. That's a long way away, isn't it? We probably won't learn anything about the plot for years and years, which is where my baseless speculation comes into play. Okay, so for starters, it has to be about the same family. It just has to be. If they move to a different family, it would be truly shit. A terrible mistake, and I would hate it. That being said though, it wouldn't be likely, because you have to tie it back into that Coco name. Because yeah, you have to have the name have some relevance to the story, otherwise it wouldn't make sense. It was the big reveal for the original, where despite her not really featuring in the film all that much in terms of screen time, she's still such a key character. The love and bond between her and her father is one that ties the whole movie together, and binds Miguel and Hector, and then her joy at hearing her father's songs at the end before she passes away. It's a big impetus for change within the whole family. They're never the same after that. So those are some big narrative shoes to fill. Where do they go with it? Certainly one way, and probably my least favourite, is to go with the idea of a prequel that follows the character of Coco and her life. That being said, doesn't really make any sense either though. It's not like you can involve the realm of the dead in any real way in her story, and that would be pretty lame, because you don't have half of the thing that made the narrative so cool. She can't visit the land of the dead because it makes it less powerful seeing her dead at the end of the first movie. Plus you wouldn't have Miguel or anything. It just would be so unsatisfying. A Coco prequel where it time lapses over the course of a couple of decades through important moments in the family's lives with the ghost watching on, that would be fun, don't get me wrong, but as a short film, I don't think the concept could carry a full feature length in any way on its own. It would get played out because you'd have to stretch it and make filler. Anyway, that's not the point of this video, let's move on. To me, it seems clear that Coco 2 is going to have a new main protagonist, Coco. Not old dead Coco, but the little sister that was named after her. Pretty sure they have the same name, and they will certainly receive the same nickname of Coco. I know that when we saw her last, she was just a little baby, but I'm pretty sure the first film was meant to be contemporary with 2017. So Mama Coco was born in 1918 and Miguel in 2005. That means it's not hard to assume that Coco 2 will also be set in the modern day when it comes out. Right now it's slated for 2029. Maybe it gets delayed, maybe pushed forward, but regardless, I think her character's going to be about 12, the same age as Miguel in the first movie. Miguel hopefully will also be in the movie too, but as more of a side role. It would be sad to see him shuffled off to the side completely, but I don't see him being the main character anymore. Maybe he could be the Hector role, perhaps? Also, it's weird to think of his character being an adult by the sequel. How old would he be? Like 24? Jeez. But yes, it seems like she's the perfect age for being a sequel protagonist, and she even has the perfect name. Plus, it would tie nicely into Coco 2, She's the second Coco. So what are some ideas that can tie her character into the realm of the dead concept? What are some ideas that could work without feeling massively derivative of the first movie? The first I can think of is one of the skeleton people getting trapped in the land of the living for some reason and being unable to return to the land of the dead, and thus it's up to Coco and maybe Miguel. Hell, you could drag the whole family into it if you wanted, just like the whole skeleton family helped Miguel. But yes, it's up to Coco and crew to save the day and send them back to the land of the dead before the night's over. Otherwise, I don't know, maybe they fade from existence because they're not supposed to linger there. Which skeleton? I don't know, maybe Coco? Would bring yet another meaning to the idea of Coco 2, wouldn't it? I get that this is just the original film but in reverse, but I think they could get some mileage out of it. That being said, though, it doesn't feel very Pixar to add something like that. I think they'd prefer a different direction. So maybe they do a Freaky Friday style body swap. Coco for anybody, as long as they have some sort of connection to the modern family. Somebody who actually would have met them before, so it shouldn't be a dead person that's been dead for a long, long time. Maybe the Coco's body swap. Maybe the grandma has also since passed away, and they get swapped. Either way, I think what's clear is that both of the characters will need to have some sort of issue with their family that can only be resolved by gaining a new understanding with the other half of the family, the living or the dead. When they manage to do that, they get to return. It's also a little bit derivative because it is just ripping Freaky Friday unapologetically. What can I say? I'm running out of ideas. So yeah, we're getting Coco 2, and I'm very hyped about it. I think people need to settle and think about how the Pixar sequels have, for the most part, been very good. Ultimately, I think if they succeed, it's good for the studio. They do often funnel money from successful films into other projects, so I think more successful sequels means more new content too. It's a win for everybody. With all that being said though, this has just been my opinions, and I'd like to hear yours. What do you think of my thoughts on Coco 2 and potential ideas for it? Do you agree with me? Maybe not? Anything you'd like to add? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.